reporter Irina Galushka there. Well, for more on the situation in Syria, let's now cross live to Michel Chossudovsky. He's the director of the Centre for Research on Globalisation. Thanks for joining us live there in Montreal. Now, the Western media paints a grim picture of the events in Syria, but as we've just seen from inside the country itself, that doesn't appear to be necessarily the case everywhere. So where does the truth lie here?
I think the Western media paints a totally fabricated image of that country, and it distorts the causes and consequences of this so-called protest movement. What we're dealing with is an armed insurrection, and that armed insurrection, and it's documented, is supported by NATO and supported by Turkey. We have to understand that the majority of the Syrian population do not support this armed insurrection, which is presented as a pro-democracy movement. It isn't. The so-called protesters, at least those so-called protesters, are gunmen. They have military equipment. They're being supplied with weapons by Turkey. It's confirmed, and consequently, we've depicted a situation which does not correspond to reality on the ground, and the so-called free press is blaming the Syrian government for the deaths which have occurred.
Okay, Michel, let's talk about the timing of this latest announcement concerning the EU banning oil imports from Syria. Is this a coincidence that these Syrian sanctions come just a few days after Libya's vast oil reserves have, well, I suppose, have effectively been secured for the EU?
Well, I think it's part of a roadmap which eventually is intended to lead into some kind of military intervention. And that is a very disturbing development. Already Turkey has threatened Syria. They've declared the north of Syria as an internal political issue. They have unilaterally stated that they have the right to cross the border into Syria, derogating its territorial rights. Turkey would play a major role in a NATO humanitarian intervention were this to be launched. And I think what's happening now is the sanctions stage of something which is being planned further down the road, which, according to many analysts, is a military intervention in Syria, which in essence would engulf the whole region.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Look, so therefore, surely aren't people, analysts and commentators, who keep saying that if Assad does fall, then that will lead not only just to massive instability and civil war in Syria, but also within the region. So why, therefore, would there be that military intervention? Some would say that they need to keep Assad in there.
Well, I mean, escalation is part of that military agenda. And US NATO military planners are perfectly aware that if anything happens with Syria in terms of military operations, immediately Lebanon will be affected, Israel will intervene, and then, of course, Iran is also threatened because the road to Tehran goes through Damascus. So we must understand from a geopolitical standpoint that a military operation directed against Syria, for whatever pretext, would lead to a much broader war, which would extend from the eastern Mediterranean, North Africa, right to the Central Asian heartland and the border with China, and again Pakistan and so on. So that we're dealing with something which, in essence, is very, very serious. And but the Western military alliance is fully aware of the implications of that type of scenario.
So do you believe, therefore, that Syria should be left to its own fate? Indeed, the developments and what happens there in Syria should be decided by the Syrians themselves? And if that's the case, you're talking what? People against a professional army, although you're saying they're armed dissidents there as well. But do you really see some sort of peaceful negotiation and an end to this stability in Syria without any foreign intervention?
what we're dealing with is an armed insurrection of Al-Qaeda affiliated organizations, Salafists, Muslim Brotherhood, which are targeting police and armed forces as well as civilians. And the objective is to trigger a response from the armed forces and the police, and then blame it on the al-Assad government. Now, I'm not suggesting that the al-Assad government doesn't bear some responsibility, but we must understand the ultimate causes of this crisis. They're not due to opposition. There's a fair amount of opposition within Syria, but most of the opposition to the al-Assad government do not support this violent protest. They believe in civil society, and the al-Assad government, whether we like it or not, has a lot of popular support. This insurrection is there to create divisions within Syrian society. It's also targeting the Christian communities. There are armed gunmen going into the Christian communities and killing people. It is an insurrection. It's very similar to the insurrection in Libya. It's integrated by Al-Qaeda. And there's no, if you read intelligence reports, they actually say, yes, we are supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. Yes, we are supporting the Salafists. Yes, we are providing them with weapons. And consequently, the issue is not the Syrian government. The issue is the aggressive intent of NATO and the United States of America in attempting to colonize or recolonize a large sector of that area extending from the Mediterranean to Central Asia. It's a war of aggression, and what they're building now is a pretext to intervene militarily. And sanctions is one of the stages, and then, of course, it goes to the Security Council, and then eventually it may result in some kind of military operation. We're not dealing with a country like Libya. This is a country of over 20 million people, and it's at the crossroads, at the geopolitical crossroads of several other countries, including Iran, Israel, Lebanon, and Iraq, and of course Turkey.
Yep.
And so that if they want to engulf that whole area in war, that is the way to do it.
Michel, we'll leave it there. Always interesting to hear your thoughts on this. Thanks very much indeed. Michel Chossudovsky, Director of the Centre for Research on Globalisation, joining us on his webcam there in Montreal. Thank you.